Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we'll be looking at BfA healers and the healers that change the most when comparing their gameplay, their talent choices. So this is a video for the people who may be playing multiple classes in Legion and they're wondering, how is my Discipline Priest, how's my Resto Shaman is going to look like in BfA? And this video will be ranking the changes based on healers that received the most changes to their rotation, the most changes to their gameplay, the most changes to their talents. And believe me, there really isn't that many changes when you talk about healers. There's only very few specs and classes that receive some groundbreaking reworks. So we'll be talking about them and we'll be ranking them. So first of all, when talking about the classes that receive the most changes, we have to talk about Mistweaver. And Mistweaver is a healer that probably feels the most different when compared to Legion, because Mistweaver received gameplay rotational changes outside of talents. So your gameplay will change no matter what. Even if you go with this talent, even if you go with that talent for 5-man for raid situation, your core rotation is going to be changed. The way that you play your Mistweaver is going to be different from Legion. The fact is that Mistweaver's Soothing Mist is now an 8-second channel. The target that you cast your Soothing Mist on, you can cast your instant Enveloping Mist, instant Vivifies. Vivify now also heals the people with Renewing Mist. Thunder Focus Tea has been changed now to increase Renewing Mist duration. It no longer affects Essence Font. Now it also works with Fist Weaving build through Rising Sun Kick. And all the sudden Renewing Mist also has 2 charges. So there is a lot of core rotational changes that happen to Mistweaver. And because of these changes, because of the talent changes, now you have different builds, different niches for Mistweavers. Mistweavers are now able to fill in that single target tank healing role, on top of the fact that it can also provide additional AoE healing through talents like Upwelling. On top of that, you also have more rewarding fist weaving builds. So now with talents like Rising Mist, your Rising Sun Kick feels stronger, feels more rewarding. You can have this different rotation in melee where you reset Rising Sun Kicks and get more healing through it. So there are multiple builds, there are multiple new niches that Mistweaver can fill in, and the gameplay has changed a lot. Now at this point I could probably stop ranking the healers, because Mistweaver is by the healer that received the most changes, and all the other specs, all the other 5 healing specs are relatively close in terms of the gameplay changes. So the fact is that I'm going to rank Resto Shamans as number 2 healer. I could do the same with Resto Druid, with Discipline Priest and things like that. But let's say I'm going to rank Resto Shaman as number 2. And that is purely because of the changes that happened with Cloudburst Totem. So this change is going to affect the people in Legion who raided with Cloudburst Totem, who used Ancestral Guidance, who use Ascendance, who use Balance, who use Artifact combo to create this massive healing burst through Cloudburst. And by playing with Cloudburst, you had these different rotational guidelines on how to optimize your Cloudburst, on what order of spells to be used while Cloudburst is active, Ascendance, Valence, like I mentioned, Ancestral Guidance and things like that. There's a lot of ways to optimize your Cloudburst, and your Cloudburst will and can be considered as a raid cooldown because the burst is insane. Now in BfA, that seems to be somewhat changing. All of a sudden your Cloudburst Totem now removes, or at least replaces, Healing Stream Totem. Healing Stream Totem has been buffed in recent couple of weeks, so the loss of Healing Stream Totem is going to be a consideration when choosing Cloudburst. Also the fact that Ancestral Guidance is no longer here, it's been just outright removed, which makes big cloud bursts kind of hard to achieve. And also, there has been some talent changes. Now you see Echoes of the Element at tier 30. By picking Echoes of the Element and by picking Cloudburst, you get 2 charges of Cloudburst, which is actually really cool. And Cloudburst is the most, or one of the most mana efficient spells in the game. The fact that it costs so little and all of a sudden your heals get put in, or a percentage of your heals get placed in your Cloudburst at no charge whatsoever. So Cloudburst becomes insanely mana efficient. But like I mentioned, replaces Healing Stream Totem, has to compete with Downpour, has to compete with Flash Floods, you also have to take into account that maybe without Ancestral Guidance, maybe people won't be picking Ascendance that much. Maybe without Ascendance, Ancestral Guidance, without Valence, without Artifact ability being available there, all of a sudden Cloud Burst is going to be a mana efficient spell that you kind of like press, you get the free heals out of it, and it's going to help out with healing. But it no longer is going to be a chain combo beast that it was in Legion, where you would chain these abilities and you get this massive raid-wide cooldown like healing. In BfA, it might be a mana efficient heal that you just press, you heal normally, maybe use Ascendance or whatever, and it's going to help out the party, help out the raid, but it's not going to be groundbreaking. And the fact is that Cloud Burst might not always be the choice. Blizzard is kind of pushing Cloud Burst not to be the choice always. Maybe you're going to try out Downpour. Maybe you're going to try out Flash Floods, depending on the situation. And all of a sudden, if you don't have Cloud Burst, the gameplay for Resto Shamans is simplified. Now, whether you like that gameplay or you don't, is all up to you. But the fact is that there is a big possibility for major gameplay changes for Resto Shaman, depending on your talent choices, depending on which talents you go with, depending on what situation, raids, 5-mans and things like that. So you have to consider that as well. So let's look at Discipline Priest, and on further inspection you'll notice that the changes that have been made to Discipline Priest have not really altered the gameplay that much. You'll notice that Plea has been removed and essentially replaced by Power Word Shield, whose cooldown has been completely removed as well. And all of a sudden you notice that you have Rapture, whose cooldown has again been lowered to 1.5 minutes. Rapture increases the absorption of a Power Word Shield, and you have this strong, almost raid cooldown available to you, especially if you combine it with like a Boomkin Innovate. Boomkin using Innovate on a Discipline Priest is not going to incur a global cooldown to the Discipline Priest. Discipline Priest will be able to put out as many shields using Rapture, and all of a sudden you have this damage absorption cooldown available to you every 1.5 minutes, which feels extremely strong in raids. But the gameplay is still the same. Putting out atonements before the raid AoE damage is coming out is still really important. Anticipating the damage, knowing the damage patterns, atonement healing is still the key. You'll be getting majority of your healing, at least in raids, through atonements. And that is essentially the same in Legion. So you won't see that much of a difference outside of certain talents becoming stronger. Talents that in Legion you might not have picked are becoming more viable in BfA. You'll notice that there's damage builds being emerged in 5-man dungeons. You'll notice that Discipline Priests are putting out substantial amount of damage, which is again extremely fun as well. You'll notice talent combos like Schism, Power Word Solace, Sin of the Many, as well as Roll 90 talents becoming much more competitive in terms of what you need more. Do you need that single target or AoE healing / damage kind of deal? So all of a sudden there's more combos or more talent builds emerging, which is extremely fun again. You'll also notice that Blizzard is trying to fill in the shortfalls of Disc with talents like Contrition. So basically if there's nothing to attack, you'll be able to provide that healing even if there's nothing to target. So that's again kind of quality of life improvements for Discipline Priest. But overall, there's new builds being emerged. Power Word Shield basically replaces Plea. Atonement healing is still very important. Knowing when the damage comes out is still going to differentiate the bad and good Discipline Priests. But the gameplay, like I mentioned, is still essentially the same in BfA. So let's look at Restoration Druids. And if you look on paper, the changes that Druid has received, there hasn't been that many groundbreaking alterations to the Druid class, and it kind of makes sense because Blizzard mentioned they don't want to take away Druids from the niche that they had in Legion, and the gameplay kind of reflects that in BfA. You'll notice that besides the talent changes, there is not that many things that changed. Tier 100 talent row still can feel extremely punishing in terms of which talent you're going to miss out on. Flourish feels extremely strong because he has Essence of Ganir baked into it. The fact is that you can also have combos or talent combos with like Spring Blossoms and Germination all at the same time, where you're going to be stacking as many hots as possible on the target as well. I mean, there have been a couple of talent builds emerging, but the biggest gameplay change comes from the fact that Rejuvenation is only 15 seconds. 15-second duration in BfA, compared to Legion, where you had the Legendary Shoulders, where you had traits like persistence, where you could really stack up your rejuvenation to essentially, you'll be able to pre-hot the whole raid. You'll be able to basically put out as many rejuves as possible, as many as your mana allows you. In BfA, that's going to be looking a lot more difficult. 15-second rejuvenation is really not that long. You'll have to pay much more attention to which targets are going to receive rejuvenation, which priority targets are going to get that extra healing, and all of a sudden it feels like that rejuvenation won't have the same impact as it had in Legion. In Legion, rejuvenation was probably by far the biggest heal you had, or at least made up the largest percentage of your healing. In BfA, that might change. It might change. Maybe cooldowns are going to play a bigger part in Resto Druid healing, especially with the fact that Tranquility also provides a hot. You have different talents that reduces Tranquility duration. You have Flourish that can also extend the Tranquility hot as well. So we'll have to see what builds are going to emerge. The fact is that 15-second rejuve is the biggest change for Druids. More selective rejuvenations are looking to be like the way to go in BfA. Whether you like that or not, we'll have to see in the future. So now let's look at Holy Priests. And Holy Priests have not really received that many changes in BfA. The fact is that some of the talents, some of the spells have become baseline. Symbol of Hope is now baseline for all Holy Priests. That's going to increase their utility in raids and 5-man, well, mainly raid scenarios. You're also able to pick a new raid cooldown through Holy War Salvation. It's a tier 100 talent. But outside of that, outside of some of the talent changes, there is really not that much just changing. Maybe you can now look at Renew as a more valid or valuable option, because it now will reduce the cooldown of Holy War Sanctify, which again, maybe Renew is going to make into your rotation, which is a change, but it's not something groundbreaking. The biggest thing that affected Holy Priests in BfA is the loss of artifact, traits. And there's a lot of artifact traits that passively, somewhat passively used to buff your Divine Hymn, your Prayer Mending, and all of a sudden those spells felt stronger, even though they were kind of passive, or at least the artifact traits that buff those spells were relatively passive. So all of a sudden those spells might not feel as powerful in BfA. But the fact is that the gameplay is still, or most likely, going to be similar to what you did in Legion. And even though the loss of the artifact traits is going to be somewhat felt, it's not really going to alter your gameplay that much. It's not really going to change the priority of your spells. So overall, the effects, or the way that Holy Priest feels in BfA, it almost feels like the Legion Priest without the bells and whistles that the artifact provided in Legion. Again, somewhat similar. So now let's go to the last healer, or the healer that I felt received the least amount of gameplay altering changes, and that is Holy Paladin. The fact is the Holy Paladin still has the beacons, Beacon of Faith and Beacon of Virtue, and even though they were, at least Beacon of Faith was relatively nerfed, it still is the staple of Holy Paladin healing. It still feels extremely strong, it still feels like the way to go. And besides that, the gameplay is very, very similar. You'll notice that Holy Shock crit cap is harder to reach, or nearly impossible to reach at this point with the specific Azeroth traits and things like that. Okay, it's more orangey in that term. There's few orangey talents that have been added to Holy Paladin builds, but those talents don't seem that strong, or at least they don't feel as the way to go outside of certain niche builds. So you're still stuck with a similar talent build you had in Legion. You're still using the beacons. You're still a great tank healer. Beacon of Virtue is amazing in 5-man dungeons. You did receive, or at least Holy Paladins received, the new talent, Avenging Crusader, which means you have to go to melee, you have to DPS, which again, the fact is that Holy Paladins and the Holy Paladin Mastery meant you have to stay in groups. You usually would spend a lot of your time in melee, and I mean, with Avenging Crusader you DPS, and that's going to heal the party members. That's the only difference, because using Wings as a Holy Paladin, in 5-man, in raid scenarios, you still had the option to DPS through offensive Holy Shocks. You could use Holy Shocks as a way to deal damage. Now with the Avenging Crusader, you will get some kind of benefit out of it, at least using your Judgment and Crusader strikes. But overall, the gameplay, I mean, if you're playing a Holy Paladin in BfA, there's very little that has changed. There's very little that you'll be like, whoa, this feels completely different. You won't be saying that when playing Holy Paladin. I mean the fact that Aura of Sacrifice has been completely redesigned and made into another version of Devotion Aura. The fact that Avenging Crusader is nothing new and it's actually a PvP talent in Legion but is now shifted into the PvE bracket kind of gives you an idea of an extent, or to what extent Holy Paladin has been changed in BfA. If you enjoyed Holy Paladin in Legion, you'll definitely won't see the difference in BfA outside of a couple of talent changes, outside of a couple of stat priority differences and things like that. So overall, Holy Paladin is my least changed healer, but I have to mention, the biggest changes came to Mistweaver, and all the other healers were relatively, I mean, it was really hard for me to rank the rest of the healers outside of a Mistweaver. So keep that in mind. I mean, the list could have been shifted multiple times. Let me know how you feel about this. Let me know which healer you're going to main. Let me know which healer you think received the best changes, which healer should receive more changes in the further patches. Let me know. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you next time.